Welcome to ECCB Connects, a production of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, where we share with you who we are, what we do, and how we serve you. In this episode, we share excerpts from Governor of the ECCB, Timothy N.J. Antoine's remarks as delivered during the recent high-level conference on building resilience through sustainable development financing. Country Director for Caribbean Countries, Lilia Burunciuc, also highlights some of the threats that are hindering the region from strengthening its resilience. Stay connected with us. We'll share more with you after this message. Thanks for staying connected. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and the World Bank's International Development Association, IDA, jointly organized the high-level conference on building resilience through sustainable development financing, which was held at the ECCB Headquarters on 10th February. IDA is the concessional financing arm of the World Bank. The conference brought together ministers of government from across the Caribbean, high-level officials from international and regional institutions, social partners, members of civil society, and the media to examine how decision-makers in Caribbean countries can build resilience in the face of multiple challenges, including high debt levels, food insecurity, and natural disasters. In his remarks, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy N.J. Antoine, highlighted some of the challenges that the region faces with accessing sustainable financing. He also said that Caribbean countries must work to create resources that will build resilience and help transform the region.
The truth of the matter is that we are convening today at a time when our world is confronting what the IMF describes as a poly-crisis. So yes, we're coming off the and still having the lingering effects of the pandemic. We're now dealing with an inflation shock or cost of living crisis, which has serious implications for food and nutrition security. And by the way, lest we think the Caribbean is not consumed or certainly impacted by this food crisis, think again. A survey by the CARICOM World Food Program last year found that almost 3 in 5 persons in our region, 57% to be precise, are confronting food insecurity. Now that's important, and that may shock some of you, because the Caribbean will not make the top list of most food insecure countries in the world. In fact, there's a list of 50, and maybe with the exception of Haiti, no other country appears, none of the Caribbean countries, but almost 3 in 5. Almost 3 in 5. And of course, in our region, it goes beyond food security or food insecurity. There's the issue of nutrition insecurity. The fact that almost 8 in 10 deaths in our region are attributable to non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and so on. We've had a lot about the pandemic, not so much about this silent epidemic, NCDs, which is killing all of us, many of us, in our prime. But I digress. The truth of the matter is we're also dealing with a climate crisis. And for us in this region, it is an existential threat. And so, as we come together to discuss in this forum, our region is grappling with high debt levels on the one hand, and the need for sustainable financing on the other hand. And that's going to be the focus of our sessions today. So if you think about the fact that during the pandemic, we had to accumulate additional debt to cushion the effect on our populations. But beyond the additional debt, just the mere growth shock, the fact, for example, in the ECCU, that we had the single largest contraction on record in 2020 of 17%. That immediately drove our debt to GDP ratio up from about 66% at the end of 2019 to 88% by the end of 2020. A 22 percentage points increase. And now we have to long road to recovery, because in the ECCU we were inching forward towards the 60% target. And now we have to start all over again, as it were. At the end of last year, that had come down to about 77%. This year, with growth, we might be looking at something, well, we'll see. Let me not preempt that. So here's the thing. We have, as a region, to deal with the fact that even as we confront the need to build resilience, which is the case for sustainable finance, we're dealing with high debt levels. We found that an IMF policy paper called Making Debt Work for Development and Macroeconomic Stability noted that in 2018, in either countries, governments spent twice as much on interest payments as they did on health. And while interest payments were increasing, education spending had stagnated. It reminds me of what Indira Gandhi said in 1969. In solving our problems, and I quote, we should be aware of creating worse ones. See the dilemma that we face. See the dilemma that we face. And so we have to consider how we can get our debt sustainability back, fiscal and debt sustainability, while at the same time creating and generating resources to build resilience and transform this region. And on the question of sustainable financing, the challenge we have in this region and amongst many of the IDA countries is that, one, many of our countries are too rich to qualify for concessional resources. The IDA countries, they get a special carve-out because of per capita income, because of size, and the countries we are dealing with today are IDA countries. But Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, are not IDA countries. And therefore, we are deemed to be too rich to qualify for grants and concessional resources. At the same time, we are too small to access the international capital markets. Do you see the dilemma that we're facing? Can you see this? How do we generate resources for sustainable financing? I do want to recognize the role of IDA in our region, because IDA has been a critical lifeline, and we'll hear about it today. So whether it is the volcano, after the volcano in St. Vincent and Grenadines, the hurricane in Grenada, what's happening with geothermal in Dominica, and what's happening in Haiti, for example, IDA resources are scarce and precious. And therefore, we want to thank the IDA contributors who have joined us today. And I have not been able to look on screen, but I hope the Canadian High Commissioner is on as a member of the IDA creditor community. We want to recognize and thank IDA creditors for making those resources available for our member countries. Of course, we need more, but we have to start with what we have, and we want to give thanks. So as I concluded, because I have 5 minutes, and they didn't say whether it was 5 EC or US, but I'm going to wrap up now. I want to make a call for action in respect of embedding disaster clauses in our debt contracts. This is something we pioneered in Grenada in 2014-15. Barbados has taken it to another level since then. Barbados is now the single largest issuer of bonds with what we call hurricane clauses, but it's really disaster clauses, instruments. We want to embed that in debt contracts on all countries, certainly small states, not just IDA. Secondly, we make a call again for more concessional resources to be made available to our region on the basis of our vulnerability, not on per capita income. And third, I repeat a call I made last October and have made since, to have annual reporting on climate finance flows to this region. Why am I saying this? Because we're getting very little. Last year, for example, $653 billion in the climate finance flows. Very little of that came to the Caribbean. In 2020, $270 billion in green bonds. Not $1 came to the Caribbean. And yet, for all, we are among the lowest emitters and the hardest hit. And by the way, IMF study has found that we are 7 times prone to a natural disaster than any other region in the world. 7 times. And when we get hit, the losses from those disasters are 6.5 times higher than the global average. We're making the case clearly for more resources for this region. And so we want to make that appeal to all who are hearing us today.
Sustainable development requires sustainable financing. This means financing that is transparent, well-managed, and well-coordinated. One source of such financing is borrowed money. When used wisely, debt helps countries invest in their futures and shared prosperity. But in developing countries, debt levels have been on the rise at alarming rates over recent years, and unsustainable debt builds risks and stunts development. That is why the World Bank's International Development Association, or IDA, is working proactively and systematically with countries to help address these risks. IDA works to protect and empower the world's poorest people. Through its Sustainable Development Finance Policy, or SDFP, IDA is incentivizing countries to borrow and invest more sustainably. IDA listens, IDA acts, IDA delivers. For more results, visit ida.worldbank.org and #IDAworks.
Debt levels for developing countries reached a 50-year high following the pandemic. That was according to Country Director for Caribbean Countries at the World Bank, Lilia Burunciuc. In her remarks, she also revealed that for some Caribbean countries, debt to GDP ratios rose by double digits in recent times.
45% of Haiti's population is facing a crisis situation on food security, and 40% of the English-speaking Caribbean reported to be food insecure by the World Food Program. This is an estimated 2.8 million in the region. A huge impact also on the debt, and Governor Antoine also mentioned that total debt in developing economies worldwide reached a 50-year high after the pandemic. And debt to GDP ratios in many Caribbean countries have increased by double-digit percentage points, and several countries face high risk of debt distress or are already in distress. Rising interest rates and investor risk aversion further accentuate debt vulnerabilities. Debt servicing is constraining fiscal space for targeted social support and for growth-enhancing investments, and for building more resilience. In recognition of vulnerability of small states, the World Bank has delivered strong support to the Caribbean crisis response efforts. Financing for small states has increased sixfold since 2015, 6 times. For the small economies, investment and budget support programs. Also, the financing terms have been the grant element of the financing terms has been increased. For small states, the grant element is 61% versus 53% for regular IDA credits. In the last 5 years, under IDA 19 and IDA 20, the bank stepped up its support to the region for crisis response. Concessional financing was further increased by the front-loading of the last IDA cycle, shortening the implementation period from 3 years to 2 years, where the World Bank was able to deliver 1 billion of assistance in support of crisis response, recovery, and resilience in the region. The World Bank has also used the catastrophe drawdown options, emergency COVID-19 development policy loans, contingent emergency response components, and ongoing operations to provide support ranging from financing medical supply and equipment to hospital refurbishments, income support programs, emergency cash transfers, support to farmers, health system strengthening, remote learning, hand washing, which is also critical, and many more. We have done much, but the truth is there is still much more to be done. So let's keep working together on it, and let's try to increase the resilience and the financing for resilience in this region.
An investment in the future of the poorest countries through IDA is an investment in the future prosperity of all. And that's why IDA works to ensure that no one is left behind.
What were the main takeaways for participants, and what actions do they hope to see happening following these discussions?
One of the key takeaways is that sustainable financing not only requires issues of debt management, but it also requires issues of human capital development, issues of building resilience, building back better, and disaster risk financing. So we learned quite a bit today about all of the facets of sustainable financing and all of the things that we'd have to do to have a comprehensive sustainable financing and disaster risk financing strategy for our country.
It was interesting hearing the various perspectives and the problems facing the Caribbean as a result of the multitude of issues facing the world at large today, and the proposed solutions. It would be interesting to see them come into fruition. So is a good start, and we're just looking forward to see what will take place from here.
What it brought to fore is that we have the knowledge and experience in the region to tackle climate change, which affects this region, which is very, very vulnerable to shocks, both in terms of climate-related events as well as economic shocks. What COVID has taught us, as well as the various hurricanes, Hurricane Ivan and Hurricane Maria, is that the Caribbean is a resilient region. We have resilient people, and together we can overcome any shocks that we encounter.
Calling all secondary and college students aged 13 to 19 years. Did you miss the 31st January deadline to submit your entry for the 2023 ECCB RSS ARU Creative Youth Competition? You have another opportunity. The submission deadline has been extended to 17th February. Hurry, hurry. Be sure to catch this new deadline. Get going. Record your song and upload that masterpiece to the Creative Youth Competition portal on the ECCB's website for a chance to be a star and win great prizes.
And now for this week's financial tip.
Consider consolidating your debt. This involves taking out a new loan and using the money to clear the other debts. The advantage here is that you will have one loan payment, and that would be at a reduced interest rate.
We're at the end of another episode of ECCB Connects. In this program, we shared highlights from the recently held high-level conference on building resilience through sustainable development financing. We know that Caribbean countries must tackle challenges such as food insecurity, high debt levels, and the effects of natural disasters as they work to become more resilient. The region must strive to create resources that will build resilience and cause transformation. Additionally, support from regional and international partners such as the World Bank's International Development Association is pivotal to helping Caribbean countries achieve this goal. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us next week when we bring you another episode of ECCB Connects.